Well, we've done the passenger side plenty enough. Let's tackle a freight workhorse. One with no competition on the Indian broad gauge. Mostly. The WG. India's freight engines very much followed British practice until after World War I. 060, 460, Big 280 for heaviest of trains. The SGS 060s and HGS 280s from the Bisa era being the regular heavy lifters for the tonnage required. To talk deeper about Indian freight traffic, we need to bring up the discussion of gauge. When railways first came to India, then Governor General Dalhousie decided they should all be a gauge of 5 foot 6 inches, broad gauge, but after his death, others in power decided on meter gauge. As well, the broad gauge was great for larger shipments and loads, an average meter gauge freight train could handle most of the traffic just as well. This of course led to two different mainline gauges, not including various narrow gauge lines, and all the transfer locations that gauge change required. Indian Railways standard locomotives arriving in the 20s upgraded the freight motive power on both gauges, and for the broad gauge came light and heavy 282s, the XD and XE class respectively. The XE 282s became one of the largest rigid frame locomotive types in India, only being outdone by the likes of Garrett's in the coalfields. Like most IRS designs, they were built through World War II, but, like most IRS designs, they had issues, and coming out of the war and into independence, after watching the likes of USATC provided engines like the AWD and AWC, plus the XE-derived AWE 282s, India decided it was time for a change. This new freight engine was designed similarly to the XE, although with bar frames and other general Americanisms to make it easier to maintain and better suited to India's climate. It would be another 282 as well, as there was no need for something larger or more complicated, and similar parts to the WP were used as well for easier standardization. Christened the WG, the first batch was constructed by North British for export in 1950, with one engine of this batch, the 8350, going on display to show Britain's industrial might at the 1951 Festival of Britain in London before being shipped to India. Like other Indian steam, the eventual goal was to build the WGs in-house. Most countries were getting out of building steam by 1950, and the WGs have to have the record for most builders over the 2,450 engines built, ranging from the aforementioned North British to Hitachi to Baldwin to Gio Ansaldo of Italy. Though by 1956, all WGs were built in-house in India's Chittaranjan works, who would go on to build just over 1,900 of them before production ended in 1970. Although new boilers were still built for a couple more years after. The last WG outshot from Chittaranjan was 10650 and was named Antim Satara, the last star. The hefty 282s quickly became main freight engines of the broad gauge, demoting any remaining 280s to lesser work and 060s to shunting duties. Some WGs were in a subclass known as the WGX, which gave the engines Buckeye couplers to work double-headed heavy mineral and fuel traffic. Some were even equipped with an oil tank that would spray fuel oil into the firebox when the engine was working hard to make the fire burn hotter and produce more steam for working a train on a heavy grade. They were maids of all work too, and could be seen anywhere from a freight to passenger work to pairs working one of India's hump yards. Which leads me on to Indian Railways and their trickle-down effect that both the WGs and their meter gauge sibling, the YGs, were part of. When the diesels started to arrive, they initially took over the fastest expresses, but mostly the freight. This cascaded WGs into availability, and as local passenger trains got heavier, the WGs became the motive power instead of pre-war 460s or IRS 462s. By the early 1980s, they truly had become the utilitarian steam engine, working what freight was still trusted to them, passenger services, some of which even received passenger liveries, and a good chunk became shunters as the older power went away, replacing 060s to S160s on different parts of the system. As for most Indian Railways steam, time started running out by the 1990s. WGs were almost entirely off freight work by this point, working local passenger trains alongside WPs, their last holdout being on Northern Railway on local passenger trains. By 1995, broad gauge steam in the subcontinent was over, at least in India, the WGs having already started to be scrapped from the end of the last decade. The last steam work train wasn't even pulled by one, instead by one of the WL Pacifics. A couple WGs went into industrial use, but the majority were sold for scrap. A class of over 2,000 is now a preserved 9. Chittaranjan Works preserved both the last built, last star, Antima Sitara, and the first WG built entirely at Chittaranjan. one 1964 built example has recently returned to steam at Rewari Steam Shed near Delhi, and it is hoped it may be used for mainline trips like the Shed's two WBs in the future. The WG is a very humdrum locomotive, built in masses to work in the background making the money, and yet, like many exports, they have a uniqueness all their own that attracted and still attracts fans. They may be 282s, but they are behemoths and reliable workhorses. What more could you ask for? Thank you to my channel members, That Niagara Guy 7597 and KHawk63. Your little contribution helps greatly for the future of this channel. Hey everyone, it's been a while. Isn't Burnout great? I've been working on the layout and being a tired adult, but that hasn't stopped me from trying to get another episode out. I'm gonna have to try and make a dedicated playlist about 282s at this rate, aren't I? Thank you everyone for watching.